Hello, this is Masati. Welcome to part two of the coronavirus awakening. We're going to go ahead and jump right in it. If you haven't listened to part one, highly encourage you listening to part one first before you get into part two. So let's jump in.
So what that means is that, let me give you an example. Say, for example, that, again, a personal example, and then we'll extrapolate it into, say, the earthly example, the human condition, humanity. Say that you've been used to abuse, or joy, or anything. But let's just, abuse is just more impactful, right? So your identity is around abuse, right, or lack. So that's, if you think about it, it's a crutch. It's part of your identity. It renders you. Without that crutch or that identity, say I delete it, and I have for people, they lose half their identity. Say if half of their identity has been all about abuse, lack, illness, they don't know what to do. They don't know who they are. So again, it's a crutch. As I delete that crutch, they start to falter, start to get weak, they start to get confused, right? Because there's nothing to support them. That identity's not there anymore. So expand that into the human world, the bigger humanity, society. Well, the concepts of control, abuse patterns, anything of that nature, there's no more energy put to it. So that energy, those energies have to collapse. Hence, the structures that create that energy, they're not getting the funding, they're not getting the source, the resources anymore. So families that operate, say the system, banking systems, whatever, I'm not going to get into all those theories, but they start collapsing. They'll start to have mental issues. You'll see a lot of distorted families. And again, it's not just about the wealth. There's a lot of poor people that are going to go be the same way because it's the same coin. Okay? Again, I'm not going to get into that aspect. That's a whole nother podcast. But you'll see a lot of, say, mental distortion, mental random deaths and so on happening in those control systems. Banks, as you see, are faltering the financial system because they're based on, say, a fiat identity. Again, something that's not true, something that is of power over the masses. That shit won't hold anymore. Okay? This is about coming into your grandness at an individual level. You can excel others. You're not all going to be the same, by the way. You can excel, but you're not going to hold anybody down for you to excel. Okay? Which is very different, by the way. So all those infrastructures that aren't true in this reality, has to falter. So as they falter, what happens is that, say that you as an individual render yourself with an identity of, say, control, abuse, and those things, or are the complement of that. The victims of those people who, control or abuse. Those, and again, it's sad to say because it's not fair, whatever it is. It's very fair. It's just straight out physics. It's got nothing to do with fairness. It's just straight out physics. It's an equilibrium. So those aspects, or opposites, or polarity, those aspects have to die off. So for example, a person that's running that way, you either change, elevate yourself to that consciousness that's not dying anymore, or you die off. What perfect way of getting, say, rid of a lot of people that don't fit the bill? that aren't up to par. So whether you're a victim or the abuser, you'll see a lot of people die off in some way. A really efficient way is maybe a virus. It's worked in the past. So in the past it was different, though. In the past it was a rendition of, say, just abuse patterns running, and then mass abuse. Just like your detox mode. Say that anger was used to control you, right? As I help you, say, awaken, anger will be used again because it's proven efficient. It's a great tool. Your spirit will use, say, anger as a fantastic tool to control you, to get you the hell out of your old patterns and into your new self. Okay? So the same thing with society. Say viruses was in the past was used to control, right? To destroy. In this case, viruses would be used to, say, cleanse, purify, and then strengthen. So it's been very successful. And again, it's not about good or bad. It's got nothing to do with that. It's just frequencies. If you're at a certain frequency, you're good. And you'll probably hang out here. If you're not, the good thing about all this is we take a deep breath in, so we get, say, the nitty-gritty of all that's happening, is that in this scenario, even those people who say perish, right, in this scenario, the beauty of it is that they awaken as they perish. In the past, they didn't awaken, so they would regenerate itself. This scenario, or this wave that's coming through, is a cleansing. It's a transparency. It's more efficient. So whether you're here in physical form, because this is just 1% of who you are, or you're on, say, a timeless form, non-existent of this reality, but still a consciousness, that consciousness of you operating from, I guess, the sins of this world, if you want to call it, or the distortions, prefer that, cannot exist. So say you perish here, you awaken, you get to be your grander version of yourself on the other side. You don't carry the burdens on the other side. So it's a win-win for everybody. Although some of you might lose loved ones or so on, you might think it's a loss. In reality, it's really not. It's an awakening process. The distortions, the abuse that runs in many families, right, that happen, those things end. Those things cannot exist anymore. Okay? And you'll see the difference, by the way. Even as death happens, an awakened death exemplifies or enlightens the living or the loved ones around them, the living around them. You'll see that. So that's another clue that, say, this consciousness or this process of cleansing is very different, because it's an awakening process for all concerned. The dying, the crossing, the crossed over, and even those people who've been crossed over, in the past, they start to awaken as well. Okay? And then obviously, living awaken. So, let's take a deep breath in. So is it the end of days? Is it the prophecies? I guess you could say it that way, but it's not about sin. It's not about, karma. It's not about, praying, saying your Hail Marys or whatever it is. It's got nothing to do with that. It's just a transition. It's just an upgrade. Right? It's a fantastic upgrade. So, I had some questions here. Anything else as we go through? So overall, we've gotten off kilter. As we become one, we've gotten off kilter. Two, and this is where we're kind of intersecting many opportunities, which is quite amazing. So everything is just coming together at once. So everything is magnified. So one, we've gotten way off kilter. Okay. Two, the frequency wave or the purity wave washing through, creating it. So it magnifies how off-center we have been. So that's another thing that you're feeling as well. So it's not just about disease. It's not just about cleansing. It's about purity. So in these next few months, a lot of things coming up. A lot of things coming up of truth. Right? Say like Harvey Weinstein, all those things coming up, all the distortions of finances and so on, what one country has done to the others, a lot of war crimes, all those things will surface up to clarify, justify, and clean up or put in order. Okay? Just like your personal life issues have to come to the surface so you can rectify them, clean them up, close the books off, balance the books. Okay, as a human consciousness, it's what's happening as well. Okay? The other thing that comes to mind before we get into the questions is that, say that the human consciousness, with all the distortions, right, is supporting, just like I said, that crutch, right? There's a lot of people supporting this human consciousness, okay, through the process of XI and other awakening events happening. But XI really one of the fastest ways to awaken in hundreds of thousands of people by now. So what happens is that those individuals awaken, right? And think of it as a hierarchy. Right? There's a huge base of people, and then on top of those people rests more people, and then more people, and then more people, and then the top few that control everybody else. So at any level, again, it's not just the bottom level, top level individuals, lower individuals, middle type of individuals, they awaken, say, through XI, exponential intelligence. They leave the consciousness, they leave the system. And this is where we have enough, say, awakening or enough power. And this is how, say, 100,000 individuals can transform millions or affect millions of people. If you've read the book, it's an older book, Power versus Force. Right? A certain number of people awaken to a certain level can, say, affect millions of people. So this is why that is, because, say, that consciousness that was supported by all these people, and they're holding all this weight up, right? Human consciousness. Well, they leave into this new consciousness. It literally is a new consciousness that I've helped create. So as people leave, it's like, hey, I'm not supporting this shit anymore. So what's going to happen? You're going to see that pyramid, that hierarchy, the control sources collapse. Okay? It's not just human consciousness, by the way, because it's a purity wave that's going through the universe. It's not just humans. So you'll see nature awaken. And I say this because even pets nowadays, they don't want to be helper animals. They don't want to absorb your crap anymore. There's so many pets that have transitioned from a helper animal going, hey, I don't want this, my owner's garbage anymore. And they don't. They just want to be a cat, a dog, a horse. They just don't want. They just want to be their pure state. It's a whole different way of, say, helping humans awaken. Before we used to absorb, that was the process. We used to absorb people's, stuff, right, to help. That's what humans did. That's what religion is about. Well, you have to burden yourself to help other people to feel enlightened. It doesn't work out. Right? It actually corrupts you. Animals process the same way. because it's of human consciousness. Even that crystal skull I worked on. If you haven't seen the video, just YouTube me crystal skull and Masati skull. You can see how that skull changed after I worked on it into a newer process, where we don't absorb peoples to help people. We cleanse, help cleanse, and awaken people. So that's this new reality coming through. So that's how, say, this hierarchy or this human consciousness starts to implode on itself. So what that means is, again, infrastructures, physical infrastructures, buildings, identities, right? They all start collapsing and you'll see that happening. And again, it's a great opportunity, right? Although it might look dark, might look bad, it's got to get rebuilt somehow. The best way to do it is excavate, start fresh. It's too hard to rebuild the old system. Money systems, obviously, religious systems, political systems, relationship type patterns, laws, all those things start to adapt, to change to a higher efficiency. So let's go ahead and take a deep breath in. So as the coronavirus comes through, and again, it's a perfect setup, not only to cleanse, but then to awaken people. You know, I've got three brothers, and you know how guys, and this is how we're going to awaken. And again, I've explained this before, but I'll explain it in a different way, especially for, say, the new people. I've always said that human consciousness at some point will awaken. Some people will go, is there going to be a third world war? Is there going to be this happening? Is that going to be happening? Is there going to be more destruction? I don't see it happening, because we'll awaken before it happens. So let me give you an example. Again, brothers, we used to play fight, and then we get into it, and then we'd get more into it, and then we'd get more aggressive. We'd get so aggressive, again, we'd get, more real. Somebody would hit you back, and you'd hit back harder and back harder, to a point that, well, like my brother broke his nose. And that was a long time ago. And then it's like, this realization comes, it's like, holy shit, we went way too far. It's not even about what is mom and dad going to say. It's like, wow, we went way too far. And there's that realization. It's just like snaps in, right? And it's like, whoa, what the hell happened? You really get to see things from a very different perspective. Okay? Well, getting into the coronavirus, right? In the past, and I'm just telling you what I see. Okay? I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but from what I'm sensing, and I'm sure there's enough proof out there as well, in the past, governments would use their citizens as a testing ground, or their military as a testing ground for certain viruses, certain diseases, certain chemicals, for chemical warfare, see how it affects people. And it's not just the U.S. government, but governments all around, right? They would use that. So I think in this situation, how it came about is that maybe to quell all the demonstrations and so on in China. It's like, hey, why don't we just try this this virus, see what happens? Because again, they've used other, say, crowd control mechanisms. Like G5 was actually a crowd control mechanism at one time. So think of that. I'm not going to say any more about that. But no comment, no further comment on that. But it's like, hey, Why don't we give it a try? And it's not just say the Chinese government. I'm sure all the other governments, because they're all in on it, they all are in a consortium. They go, well, yeah, let's give it a try. So let's see what happens. Let's see what's going on. And then, just like that brawl my brother and I had, got a little too far, got a little out of hand. They didn't expect that something like this would take over. Something like this would, say, snowball into something bigger that is way out of their control. And the political leaders are going, holy shit, what the fuck just happened? And again, this is where, and you'll see in a very short time, as it magnifies, people are going to go, what the hell just happened here? We've gone way too far. And then that consciousness, that hypnosis that people are under, it's like, boom, they awaken. So this is where people are at war, for example, right? Say if you're in a war, and then the hypnosis wears off, and then people, the military, they're fighting each other. They awaken. It's like, what the hell are we doing shooting each other? Right? What the hell are we doing against each other? The religions wake up and go, what the hell are we fighting for? All those things, even at a personal level, it's like, why are we arguing against each other? So that's basically what's going to happen as it goes in a little deeper. There's going to be that awakening. But that's how it all started, by the way. And another thing that I want to explain on this is that there's another consciousness that, you remember when I said the world has gone off kilter, right? Somehow it has to equate or regulate itself back into center or balance or harmony. Well, that consciousness, that natural, say, science behind it of coming back to center, it doesn't matter how it comes back to center. And that's what humans get stuck on. Because some people, I'll say that and they go, well, it's because somebody ate bats and it came out. Or, some lab got messed up, which I think it is. Or this happened, or that happened. Those are physical things, just like in your life, well, it's because my husband did this, I was abused of this, and this happened. There's underlying frequencies that cause that to happen. Okay? Let me give you a deeper example, is that the atom bomb that was dropped, Second World War. So the Allies were in a rush to say come up with an atom bomb because they were spying on Hitler, and they were coming up with the atom bomb. So it's like it was a race on who could come up with the atom bomb. So that consciousness, okay, the higher level consciousness at a human consciousness, is like, well, the Allies will come up with that and save the world. Because if Hitler got it, the world would be doomed. It doesn't fucking matter. It just doesn't matter. The point is that the atom bomb was used. It was mass destruction. Simple as that. After the atom bomb, whether the Allies dropped it or the whoever else dropped it, does it really matter? There's havoc still exists. Abuse patterns still exist. Everything else, nothing changed. Nothing changed. It's just the people in power. Simple as that. Nothing else changed. So the reason why I say that story is like, at the surface human level, you might think it's because of X or because of Y. At the higher level, something had to happen for that consciousness, for humanity to create more havoc upon itself. So it didn't matter who did what. It doesn't matter if the good guys or the bad guys. And who is the good guys and the bad guys anyway? Have you ever thought of that? Who is the good guys and the bad guys? Everybody says that they're good. Every religion says that they're good. But then they all destroy each other. So what's the good in any of the ideas. Democrats, Republicans, the country's in havoc. There's more teenage suicide, more kids that are hungry. Millions of kids go hungry in the U.S. alone, which is a shame for this country, by the way. Again, I'm not going to get into that. No comment on that. But does it matter? The point is that the consciousness that is ruling this reality deems that havoc occurs. It doesn't care if it's the good guys or the bad guys. It doesn't care. All it cares is havoc has to occur. Right? I say this because in this new consciousness, that havoc ends. That's what it's about. So, as we take a deep breath in, as a note, 1918 Spanish flu, which also was a coronavirus, killed 20 to 50 million people. So this one's a long question, and I'll do it really quick. I'll read it really quick. So everyone around me is freaking out, but I don't really think of it at all. But whenever I have a human interaction, I can see how terrified, scared, and worried they are. So that makes me wonder if I should be more worried and stressed, but I still don't. Question is, would having strong negative emotions increase the likelihood of attracting what you most fear? And how come I'm not affected the same way as the rest of the world? Because you're doing XI, and would being relaxed decrease the possibility of its existence in my reality? It's not about your belief systems, right? Unless those belief systems are relaying the level of, say, awareness or awakening you are. So basically, like I said in the past, before, the higher awakened you are, the more likely you are going to be totally fine. So it's not about your fear or anything like that. Again, it's how awakened you are. Okay? And most people, although they may go, well, it's a coronavirus and all that, there's an underlying tension, anxiety, frequency of something is going to happen. People will equate it to the coronavirus because that's proximity, that's what they can attach it onto. But the bigger version is time and space. The density of time and space is changing, and that's what most people are feeling. And the reason why that would, I don't want to say the reason why that would be, is that as time and space becomes more transparent, you can't hide the garbage that most people hide. You have to, say, see it, because everybody else will, not justify it, clean it up, get rid of it, solve it, because there's nowhere to hide it anymore. That's the anxiety that people are feeling. Okay? How do you protect your family from the virus, Moss? For me, I've always done this, even years past every flu season. What I do is, again, I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but it's worked for me. Is that I use hydrogen peroxide. It's a 3% hydrogen peroxide. I spray it. I breathe in and inhale. I'm sure there's videos on it. I inhale 3% food grade hydrogen peroxide. I inhale and it goes down my lungs. I do it, as many times as I can. I just leave the spray bottle on the counter every time I pass by. I do it. It's fantastic. At first, it doesn't taste that great, but what I found out is that the healthier you are, the less taste hydrogen peroxide has, because it's not killing off the bacteria. It's the bacteria that makes that chlorine taste, or that bleach taste. You can spray it in your ears, starting to do that, and then a little bit in your nose. And I do that with my kids as well. So, and again, it's not just the season. I've done it every season. when I'm around. How does coronavirus figure into the purity wave other than weeding people out? Well, we talked about that extensively. People who died from the coronavirus, did they choose it at the spirit level? What is the pattern of these people who fall victim of unfortunate events? Well, nobody really chooses anything. It's really not a choice. Your life that you've created is not a choice. If you were awakened to create, would you create the way you did? Obviously not. So it's more of evolutionary process, right? It's just the next step forward. So basically, those individuals who died from it, it's just the next step forward. They weren't that awakened, right? They had other issues. The good thing is again, as this process comes through, it is a cleansing process or an awakening process. So as they may have died from it, most likely they're, say, awakened, and maybe the first, first few, maybe not, but as more and more people awaken, the consciousness awakens, they'll awaken as well. So again, it's just the level of consciousness. So what that means is if you're running abuse patterns, right, you would be more likely attracting abuse to yourself. If you're not running abuse patterns, even if you were, say, in an abusive neighborhood, you would not be abused. So same thing here. Is the coronavirus serving as a purging, cleansing agent, much like you describe other natural disasters? Yes. By the way, nature is in on it as well. Nature is reclaiming itself. Parks, recreation areas, whatever it is, you've heard those things: trash in, trash out. But the trash that we don't, which is most important, is the frequencies that we leave behind. All the distortions, abuse patterns, things like that, right? We walk away feeling really grand. Where do you think those frequencies go into? I can go into, and I've done, a few places, by the way. We've gone in, we've had to literally clean out the frequencies before we start meditating, because you could just feel the stench that other people have left behind in it. So, and then we do our session. So nature is not holding, just like the animals, they're not holding on to that garbage anymore. They're giving it back to you. It's like, hey, you got to deal with it. You got to get rid of it. There's a reason for that, by the way. Say nature holds on to, you've got 10 pounds of garbage. You go into a park, you let go of it. Right? Although, say it's spiritual garbage, you might not think it's there. If you could actually feel it, if you could actually see it, if you could actually smell it, it'd be a huge stench. Right? It'd be a big pile that you'd leave behind as you come back out. Okay? So say you've got, say, 100 pounds of garbage that you just left behind. Right? You went hiking, you went whatever, or you dumped it on your kids or your spouse or your animals. Right? So what that does basically is that, you dropped off 100 pounds of garbage. That just basically tells you, it's like, hey, somebody can clean up my garbage, so I'm going to create another 100 pounds of garbage. So now you've got 200 pounds of garbage instead of your only, because if you were full, you'd create less garbage, if that makes sense to you, right? Or less burden for yourself. But since you know that somebody else is going to take it for you, whoever it is, well, it's like, hey, I can create more. So how many people can you do that to? And then how many people are there? So now you've got double the burden. So that pattern, and it is a heaviness or a cloud over society, humanity. You can see it in a lot of families. Right? You walk into their house and it's just this heaviness. That's what that's about. And by the way, when those patterns of people who die, that garbage just dumps on the living automatically. So anyway, that type of pattern is stopping. So people are reclaiming or having to reclaim their garbage. That's what many people are going to be feeling. And they're going, shit, I didn't know I created that much garbage. Well, you got to rectify it. The lucky thing is people who've done XI, they've already cleaned that stuff up. So as this wave comes through, you ascend really, really fast. You magnify really, really fast. So nice job, guys. Many say the coronavirus is no more of a threat than the flu. Is there an unnecessary element of fear surrounding the virus? And what if so? Why? That's true. But neither was the Spanish flu. It was just another virus. So it's a little bit more than a flu. A lot more. You're going to see, yes, the flu does kill people every year. I don't know the exact numbers, but it kills quite a few people every year. But this is going to be a lot more. Okay? And it's one of those things that it'll come through, awaken, cleanse, however you see it. Most importantly, it's going to awaken in that intelligence gap between technology, human consciousness, abilities, and so on. That awakens because people are going to find and realize what's important to them. Right? They're going to go back into themselves, not outside, to find their genius. You're going to go inside to find their genius, their human potential. Where was I? So again, more than just your standard flu, because it's going to affect more. Obviously, it's going to affect business, like it has already. It's affected ours. Our events in LA got canceled. Government mandate. The good thing is that we can do our stuff online, so which is good. Is it a natural occurrence or manufactured by man? Let's just say that the consciousness, or say the natural occurrence of something, some agent having to happen, whether it's this virus or something else, to bring it back all to center. But to me, it was, say, created by man. And it got out of hand. Okay. Again, another distortion on crowd control. What can you do, and what would you do with your abilities to help the coronavirus? Well, we do that. We awaken people. So you send higher, you help awaken people at a higher level, to a higher level, and most likely, and it's not just spiritual, awakening, health, abundance, or immune system. Your physical body is going to be in shape to handle the virus. So that's what we do. Again, as you awaken, you're healthier all the way around. You're more immune, so you can sustain more. One thing that I forgot to mention, unfortunately, is 5G doesn't help the viruses or anything else. 5G basically sterilizes the air. It kills off, say, the water, the way water absorbs into the body, hence oxygen. Right? Oxygen, because the oxygen obviously has water wrapped around it. So as 5G, say, penetrates the air, it almost, say, disinfects it. So some of that, so the air, which has a natural cleansing property of its own, it's void of everything, basically sterile. When something is too sterile, it can't fight or ward off disease or germs, and especially if the oxygen components are, say, from what I'm seeing, is like spinning way too fast. I don't know the molecular structure, but I'm just seeing something's out of, say, kilter orbit. It spins way too fast. So what happens is, as you breathe in the oxygen, your hemoglobin, or I don't know, red blood cells, again, not a doc, I'm just telling you what I see, layman's terms, can absorb the oxygen. So literally, you can't breathe. You feel like you're drowning or suffocating, which doesn't help if you have congestion, colds, things like that. So that's not a good thing either. Another side note. another side note as well on top of that, hand cleansers, hand cleaners. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not a health professional, but in most cases, I use hydrogen peroxide to wipe off my hands because it kills off the bad germs and leaves, say, the good bacteria that's in your hands. If you've ever seen somebody who's anal and washed their hands with soap all the time, it kills off the bacteria and it starts, chafing, dryness, cracking, and so on like that, and then bacteria builds in their hands. So if you use too much, say, alcohol-based hand cleaners, right? Disinfectants, watch out for that. Right? So I'm not saying not wash your hands, but just be careful that you don't overexpose or just kill off the bacteria that's protecting your body. So, as a suggestion, do your own research. I would use hydrogen peroxide as a spray on your hands and your face. And then exercise teaches us to use any situation for strengthening. Yes. So how can I strengthen from the situation? So if you start to observe, you start to see the underlying reason, especially with this podcast. You start to see the underlying reason on why this pandemic is happening. Okay? And as you start to see the underlying reason, you can step away from it. One, you can protect yourself from it. Two, you can learn from it. Three, and then you can, I don't want to say take advantage of it, but help you ascend higher. So take advantage of it. And again, advantage has a negative meaning because taking advantage means that other people have to suffer. But if you're doing it through an XI or a purity standpoint, as you awaken, you help awaken others. So you're taking advantage of the situation to awaken and not stepping on other people. But as you awaken, your light shines, and other people follow your light. Go, hey, that's the direction. So in that case, advantage becomes a positive term. So in this scenario, just like other catastrophes or crashes, most of the millionaires, most of the great ideas, most of a high number of new ideas, inventions, millionaires and so on have been, say, built around times of situations like this, right, or disasters. So remember that. That's an XI move, by the way. So hopefully this was clear. If you have any other questions, contact Masei, M-A-S-E-I, Masei, at massajani.com. As we end, notice what you notice, and then notice the details. Before we go, what we'll do is we'll do a meta reprogramming, a meta healing on the coronavirus and how to, say, best benefit from it. Okay, or the situation, not just coronavirus, or this purity wave that's coming through in March. So we'll do that coming up. So take a look at that. Go to massajani.com. It might not be up. I just thought of it right now. Or sign up on Instagram or Facebook, Mas_Sajani. Now, as we end, notice what you notice. Start noticing the details of what you notice.